I was in Tucson on Monday and Tuesday, and I can't resist showing a couple photos from it. So this is I just love these splendid. It's such a different world. The flora is astonishing to me, and I particularly like the way this turned out in the evening because of the sun brightens it and it reflects, and you have the yellow combination. I like the composition in that. Composition's important. These things just amaze me. And look at the detail of this workmanship. I mean, this is beyond, it's staggering. It's staggering when you just think about the artistry that goes into the complexity. And this is more than DNA. What actually makes it, it's epigenetic. What guides it to open it up in just one place and another. I love the saguaro, and that's only in the Sonoma Valley, that valley there. And I can't believe the beauty of these things. So I had to zoom in. And each of these is a wonder and a marvel. And then this is the old man cactus. It looks like a fur on a cactus, you see. And this at night, they're very starry because of the beauty of the sky. So I just couldn't resist. I had to show it to you because I love beauty. And what was bothered me there, and remember, this is consistent with what we've been talking about all along, isn't it? About noticing these things. All these people are at this wonderful conference center. It was very beautiful. I didn't see anyone really looking at the beauty around them. They were so focused on their agendas and on each other that nobody hardly noticed it, and which is a sadness to me. But it's very consistent with what we said, that everyone's exposed to beauty, but not everyone is wonders, and even fewer then become curious. And yet the smallest number are the ones who submit to the mystery that so transcends your imagination. You see, so that's how God speaks to us through beauty. But now we're going to be going on to a new topic, 5 weeks on the Upper Room Discourse, John chapters 13 to 17. And as I said before, this is the sanctum sanctorum of the Scriptures. It's the place. It's the holy place, the most holy place, because only in John and only here do we get to listen in to Jesus' words, knowing full well that the hour had come in which he should depart from the world. My hour has not yet come becomes a theme, a motif in John's gospel. My hour has not come. What is it between you? He keeps referring to that. But now, significantly, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come, that he should depart from the Father. So there's a sense of the presence of God's timing, and he was waiting for the perfect timing of God. And here at the very end of his ministry, they still don't get it. The disciples still do not understand that he's going to leave them. And here he has to finally make it clear to them. And only in the 11th hour, 11:59 and change, do they finally get it. And then it's at the end of this upper room discourse. And then in John 17, the high holy prayer, the high priestly prayer that's offered for us. So it's truly an amazing thing because, again, put yourself in this scenario that you know that you're going to be having your coronation day tomorrow. You know for sure. And that you'll be lucid and you'll be able to share with your friends and your loved ones. Let's give it a week. Say it's a week from now, so they have enough time to come. They can come from wherever you want them to come and be with you, knowing that this is your last will and testament, but it's verbal. It's a declaration. An interesting thought, isn't it? To actually do such a thing. There is an exercise whereby you could certainly do that, acting as if it were, and then bringing people, and it would be a very meaningful experience for everybody. Because you're telling them what if this were my last day with you, this is what I'd want to convey to you. This is what I've learned. These are the insights that one should have. So here you have a person who knows full well that in less than 24 hours, he'll be on the cross. And the agony that he will encounter, shedding drops of blood, as it were, in the Gethsemane. And yet at the same time, this message is about 3 things that become very predominant. The first 3 fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, and peace. Now, I invited you to read this in preparation. I hope a few of you did that. And good for you. And if you did that, did you notice that love, joy, and peace are surprisingly frequent? How other-centered this is? It's not at all about him. It's his passionate desire for them to get it. And finally, they get it. But it's an awesome thing, and it's a portrait as well of so many aspects of the themes of what it means to know Christ and make him known, what it means to have a sound, robust theology, to think well, to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, with the entirety of your being. All the themes of the epistles are seated in this narrative. In this narrative, you have all the themes of the subsequent epistles that would be there. So it's really holy ground, as you can imagine. And only, as I say, John provides it. How impoverished we would be without it. Now that you know you have it, you know how impoverished it would be if you didn't have it. So I think it warrants a special study for us together, and these 5 weeks are dedicated to that. So let's think about what that looks like. The John 13 to 17 discourse, but before I go into, I'm going to just limit myself to one or two thoughts. And I want to talk about the first 3 verses in particular as being particularly important. But let me just give you a quick overview of the text, and then I'm going to zoom into one part of it. Obviously, now, you know, I've done teaching series on John. I think one took 3 years to go. So it's not like you're going to be able to teach a chapter of John. You can't do that. You mine it and you find new treasures within. It's John, as I told you before, uses a vocabulary of a child, simple enough for a child to wade in, but it's profound enough for a philosopher to drown in, because it's filled with a depth that transcends your imagination. Just that prologue to John, chapter 1, verses 1-18, is a wonder and astonishment. One of the greatest theological treatises. That and Romans 1-8 would be the greatest theological treatise. It's just astonishing stuff. So you just see how John is written from a man who knew him well, and who would actually break bread with him, and he would be at the right hand. And John's the one who always was there with him, and because he chose to be there with him. So he was one of the inner circle, as I see it, because he hung around with him. And again, you can imagine the disciples, they're all walking with him, but most of them are walking with each other, talking with each other. How many can walk right next to him or very close to him, you see? Where would you be in that situation? So it's an interesting thought experiment of where would you be if you begin to grasp, as they slowly did, but still even slower than the women. It's interesting. The women understood better, but it began to dawn on them that this may be the very one who created the heaven and the earth, who gives a face to eternity and to infinity. Then you begin to realize if that's what we're looking at, then you'd be a madman to be hearing him secondhand. Wouldn't you want to be hearing him firsthand? That's what I want for people. I want them to hear him firsthand. That's the whole point, by the way, of Jesus in his own words, as you know. It's to get to hear him firsthand and feed it in such a way that it becomes, there's a movement to tell us in this, a direction in this. And as a result, you get to encounter with, and the only commentary is just to clarify and contextualize, no Christianese and jargon and all that stuff. So that's why I challenge people. It's written really for the purpose of giving to a skeptic or a seeker. Because I often use the intellectual, I may even appeal to intellectual pride. Person who likes to make a virtue out of skepticism or out of non-decision, big mistake. What I tell them, you owe it to yourself to make an informed intellectual decision as to whether you receive this Jesus or reject him. A third option is not available. There was not a thief of indifference, a third thief of indifference by the cross. One received, one rejected. You don't have a choice, but you'd be very foolish not to at least be informed without basing your view of him on second and third hand opinion, as almost everybody does. So I don't mind appealing to their pride, because if they have integrity, they would be willing to at least examine the words and to hear it and give it a fair case. And in my view, the wisest thing one could do as you approach something like this is to say, I don't really believe in you, but if you did exist, show me. Even that. It doesn't take much, but you got to give them something to multiply. You can't multiply zero. So there's a little bit of a seek, and there's a deep mystery in all this. At any rate, knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of this world. And so we're at the Holy Week now, and all is leading to this, and he knows he'll be the fulfillment of all the spring feasts, effectively. And knowing that his hour had come, that he would depart out of the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. It's a beautiful statement, isn't it? This enduring love. Love which is the steady intention of your will to another person's highest good. And there's an enduring love that he has for us. During supper, the devil having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him. So you already see the scenario here. There's a growing tension. And Judas was awfully good because they never suspected him, you see. But Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hand, that's the first thing. Number two, because this verse must not be overlooked, verse 3 is absolutely essential to your understanding of what he's about to do. So he knew three things. He knew that the Father had given all things into his hand. Secondly, he knew that he'd come forth from God. And then third, he knew he was going back to God. He knew his significance, and he knew his derivation. He knew his destiny. He was secure. He was secure and significant, and he had a clear identity in who he was. It was because of that he was able to take on the robe of a slave, of a servant. It was only then he was secure enough to serve. You cannot serve well. You may have the illusion of service. You'll be tested if you're a servant, when somebody else gets the credit. But the idea, though, is that you are going to be called having a spirit of servanthood, because at the end of the day, he girds himself with a towel and he washes their feet. It's a visual parable, as we're going to see, and wipe them with the towel with which he was girded. So he comes to Simon Peter, and I'm going to unpack this a bit more in just a moment. I'm just giving you an overview. Now, Lord, do you wash my feet? And Jesus answered and said to him, you don't realize it now, but you'll understand. And then Peter, one extreme to the other, never shall you wash my feet. And then he says, if I don't want to wash, you have no part. And then he goes the opposite extreme, also my hands and my head. The man is not a man of basically known for balance. He's one extreme, but he does mature. And the Peter of Gospels and Acts, there's a maturity in the Peter of his first and second epistles that is very evident. It's very interesting. There's a development there. But he was bathed, and he's only washed his feet, and you're clean, but not all of you. He knew the one who was going to betray him. And that raises the astonishing question. Jesus knew from the beginning this is the one who would betray him. Yet someone must fulfill all things, because he knew as well he would be betrayed because of the prophecy. He knew the scriptures. And my own familiar friend, that it was you. And so this idea of that betrayal, and yet what did he do? He washed the feet of the one he knew who would betray him. It's an incredible thought when you think of it. Even there, it's the love of God. But even there, that love, that mercy could evoke repentance. Someone would do it, but it didn't have to be him. It's a deep mystery involved in this. And so, do you know what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, so I am. If I then, the Lord and the teacher, wash your feet, you also ought to wash one another's. And so, again, as I've said before, Jesus never invites us to do something for others that he hasn't already done for us. Now think about that. To forgive, We can forgive because he forgave us. We can serve. He served us. We can teach. We can abide. We can do whatever he did for us. He never invites us to do something. So he's the incarnate. He's the one who goes before us and that lives in us. And so because he's in us and you are in him, then you are empowered by the infinite one who created all things. It's most astonishing the more you think about it. It's dazzling. There's nothing else. Everything is boring and mundane and just plebeian. Every other worldview is so deficient of biblical Trinitarian theology. Nothing's even close. The more I see it, the more I rejoice in that, because it is an evidence of its truth, its uniqueness. But we go on. I say a slave is not greater than his master. So again, he's saying, I'm the one who did this, and you do this as well. I'm giving you a basis, a visual parable. And I'll tell you more about that in just a moment again. So he says, he receives whoever is said receives me. Again, I cannot go through the whole chapter. It's impossible, as I told you. But he then said, so they didn't know who he was speaking about. So tell us who it is. And it's the one for whom I shall dip the morsel and give it to him. And so when he had dipped, the two of them dipped together. And it was a powerful moment. And then Satan entered into him. So the final straw, you see, it was still a possibility. But at that point, then, he reached the point of no return. And so he says, what you do, do quickly. None of them knew why he said this. They're supposing he had the money box. He was saying, buy the things. Judas was good. There was no evidence that he would be the one who would betray him. So we're wondering who he was. And so now is the Son of Man glorified, because you see now that process of his betrayal and the fulfillment of Scripture is about to be fulfilled. He's being glorified in his death as well as his burial and as well as his resurrection. This is the hour for which I came. In fact, the Feast of First Fruits, the Feast of Resurrection, but right after the Passover. So it's needful that the crown comes the cross comes before the crown. So he says, I'm with you a little while longer. You're going to seek me. Now I say to you, where I'm going, you cannot come. And that disturbs them greatly. That they were fearful of this. That they said, something's wrong. He's going with his face like a flint to Jerusalem. What's wrong? They knew something, and now this indeed terrifies them. So this is not, they can't even hardly hear that he says that you have love for one another, because they're troubled by the fact he's going to leave them. It'll dawn in them, and he promises that the Spirit will actually be in them and will bring to their minds all the things that you were not able to remember, because we are very selective in our hearing, aren't we? We tend to remember things that are more in our favor and ignore things that are not. Maybe I'm the only one, but I don't think so. Yeah. So he says, but where you go, and this is another disturbing thing, you cannot follow me now, you fall later. And so this question, when he then says, a rooster won't crow until you deny me 3 times, a frightening word. And so this is a dark place, a dark time for the disciples. It's no wonder then that he's going to say, do not let your heart be troubled. He's going to now want to comfort them as well, you see, naturally. So he knows their hearts, and he wants them to have peace and not be troubled in their inner spirit. Now, let me go back to these little words here at the very beginning of John 13. Did I go? Here it is. So particularly, as I said, the Jesus, verse 3, is what we're going to be looking at. So I'm going to be going back to here. And when I look at this, I think of this. I think particularly of loving others compassionately. And let me show you what I mean by that. Loving ourselves correctly, God completely is the basis for loving ourselves, as seeing ourselves as God sees you, which makes you secure enough to serve. And that's the whole idea here. Here's the sequence. Because we love, the more we allow him to define us and know him and are defined by him, the more you can love yourself. How do you define it again? Remember? Choosing to believe that what he tells you about yourself is true, in spite of your feelings and experiences to the contrary. Note the word choosing. Your most powerful asset is your will. apart from the Holy Spirit. So the ability to choose, because you strengthen the will by exercising it. Most people have flabby wills, as I say. Loving self correctly, the more you choose to believe what the Word says instead of what the world says, you're secure enough to love others compassionately. Does that make sense? So it's a simple sequence. So one empowers and leads to the other, and then it's a full circle. It just keeps on rotating and revolving. So effectively, we know that there's no peace in relationships in a fallen world. There's a broken, a split apart. He's the comprehensive relationship restorer, is he not? He's the one who makes it possible for that which was split to join together. So when we go from the vertical to the horizontal, I want you to notice then there are these commandments. Loving God with all your heart and loving one another. One is vertical and one is horizontal. Do you see the concept? And so the vertical, the love of God, is expressed in the horizontal by your love of people. So there's a sequence that you have here. And to love one another and to love your neighbor as yourself, that you can see empowers the other. So to express God's love in the horizontal involves a few things. No act that begins with the love of God does not end with the love of neighbor. So again, as I've loved you, love one another. So this is an important principle. It begins with the love of God. It's going to be manifesting itself from the unseen to the seen, from the theoretical, as it were, to the physical and the practical. So you're actually bringing it into being again. As a gospeler, you're telling the story, you're living the story, you're a narrative, you are the story, you're the epistle written by others. And so thus, the more we love God, clearly, the more we will want to and be able to express his love for others. It makes perfect sense. So this whole idea of being drawn by the love of God, and one of the ways in which we do that, do you love me more than these? And I think, who do you say that I am? And you begin to meditate on his attributes and have vehicles by which you stretch your mind's eye. And especially the best thing you can do with Jesus is to ask what he did for you. You want to love him? Remember what he did for you. And that will then give you specificity, instead of trying to conjure up a feeling. And so I think you have that list, do you not? That we gave you of things that Jesus did for you. Please use that list. So I'm urging you to do it. And hopefully a few of you will. I don't know. But I think I know for sure this will enhance your interior life. I have no doubt about it. You know the one I'm talking about then, right? It's the document on, it talks about the three questions. Who do you say I am? Do you love me more? And then, what do you seek? Who do you say I am? Do you love me more than these? And then it adds extra things that you didn't have before. And one of them is amplifying the question, who do you say that I am? And it gives you a few things there that really help you. Because the more you do this, you will find by meditating on what he did for you, he loved me this much, will actually enhance your love for him, you see. And just praying for the grace of holy desire that you would love him more than these. That's why he asked that question, because he'll brook no rival. And yet you might not be able to say, I love you more than these, but do you want to love him more than these? And so it goes. It's a gradual process of growth. But those who do not love do not know God, for God is love, as he describes it in the text. So, and if I understand who and whose I am, I will then be able to do this. Now, this quest for greatness in the sight of men is granted that we may sit one on your right and one on your left in your glory. They were just bickering about this earlier that evening, about who's going to sit in the place of glory at your right and the left. So they were fighting for their place in the sun. Do you think they're going to be therefore willing to actually endure the embarrassment of doing what the servant was supposed to do when nobody actually practiced the hospitality? Because you don't go up to the upper room without a servant being with a basin. And they go up there, nobody does it, because if they did that, they're going to lose their place in their son. So they're always thinking about themselves. As a consequence, they realize they're violating their troll tradition. So Jesus then shocks them when he takes on the order. It becomes the order of the towel. And so how is he able to do that? Well, the essence of true greatness is this. Even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. But I am among you, as he says, as one who serves, and then he gives them this visual parable. That's an astonishment. And then read washing each of the feet. You just process what that was like and the effect that it had on them as well. He was Lord yet servant. He knew his dignity and power. He knew his significance and identity, and he knew his security and destiny. He knew that the Father had given all things into his hand. He knew that he had come from God, and he also knew that he was going back to God. Knowing these three things, he was able to be secure enough to serve. Why? Because he was not defined by and bound by the opinions of others. Think about what he received by others: criticized, rejected, slandered, misunderstood, plotted against, betrayed, denied, and abused. Suppose he bought that experience and allowed his experience to trump the truth of God's reality, of God's word. Do you think he would have been secure enough to serve them? Impossible. So he has to grasp, and he's being trained by the Father to allow God to define him. And here's the amazing thought. Christ's resources are your resources right now. Because you see, you've been given every spiritual gift. So just as he received everything, so you have received every spiritual gift in the heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Not only that, but you have your significance and identity. He came forth from God, so now you have. You've come forth from God. You're no longer a slave, you're a son. And third, he knew his security and destiny. Nothing can separate us from his love. He knows where he's going, and so we do too. You see, we're going through that second birth canal to home. So that's an incredible thought then. We have the same truth, and it's very powerful. So therefore, you can be secure enough to serve without reciprocity or manipulation. You're no longer enslaved by the opinions of others. You have nothing to prove and no need to manipulate and impress, and this love without strings. I want you to chew on that around your tables. I shared something. I'm thinking out loud here. Before we go chat about our experience, I shared something with my group. I've probably shown this to you before, but I just feel inclined to do that with you as well. This is something that I came up with. I was teaching at the Institute for the Center for Sino-Christian Studies I think it was in Hong Kong in 2017, I think it was. And they had PhDs and doctoral candidates from all the provinces of China. And it was there, and it was a great opportunity to meet with all these people, extraordinary force of people. In so many ways, I was just enriched by their presence. And so, well, something odd happened to me the very first day of my teaching. And I was teaching on spiritual formation and so forth. It was really a rich time we shared. But something happened where I got an insight that I wanted to write down. And then the next day I would give it to one of the students, and he would then turn it into a graphic. So the first day I came up with this chart, the Western and the Eastern. I'm going to tease it out in a moment, but just to show. Then the second day, it got more elaborate, you see. So he modified it. And then the third day, even more. And now getting some color in there and getting more. The fourth day, now we got this in there. The fifth day, it ended up being like this, you see. And then finally, by the end of the week, though, we had it like this. And I realized there's something in there I just added to my group that I hadn't thought about here, the word jazz. But let me explain why I have it this way. Because you see the typical extreme of individualism, prevalent in the Western, but not limited, but still you have this extreme of individualism versus collectivism. And only does the unity and diversity, the diversity and unity of the Trinitarian theology give us a better vision. Instead of being immanent or immanent in both ways, it's just limited, transcendent. But also, what I want you to notice, the difference between being independent and codependent, and being interdependent. Do you see that idea? And third, in addition, or to put it this way, egoism or autonomy and versus absorption. But here you have communion. And it's only because God is a being of community, you see. So we have, also notice, and I talk more about it, perfectibility and others, but notice here at the bottom, posing versus masking. The West is more guilt-based. The East is more shame-based. The gospel is grace-based, you see. And so there's a rich contrast that you have, but it made me then think about this great statement I've shared with you before, and I love it. It's one of the best insights I've discovered in terms of a principle for life itself. And it was when I was watching jazz, Ken Burns' series on jazz, which I highly recommend for you to see. I think it's 9 or 10 sessions, but it's excellent. But there was, in one, I forget which season, which session, maybe number 3 or so, he said something. It was Wynton Marsalis was being used by Burns as being the spokesperson, perfect guy, because not only is a world-class classical trumpeter, he's awfully good, but he's also equally world-class as a jazz trumpeter. He's unique. He is as good in both. He's an astonishment. But he's a brilliant thinker as well. And he made a statement, and I said, wait a minute, did he just say that? And I'm so glad that I paused it and went backwards. I'm so glad I did it, because I'd never know it otherwise. He made this statement, and then I wrote it down. Here was his definition of jazz. Jazz, it rewards individual excellence, but demands selfless collaboration. I want you to hear that again. Jazz, it rewards individual excellence, but it demands selfless collaboration. That's what we're talking about, this jazz that we're looking at here, you see. It's the jazz of the gospel, the jazz of living, the jazz of good theology, of an interconnecting matrix here where you take the best of both. So, for example, when the ensemble leader points to the bass or to the trumpet or to the drums or anything that or sax, what's he doing? He's saying, now I want you to follow his riff. He's the one who's now here, and you're going to have selfless collaboration with him being the one who will enjoy his individual expression. And all of us will be well off. This was never invented until our time in America, because it's more than just improvisation and variation. It's much more than that. It's a deliberate movement of authority. Do you see how this applies to the principle we're talking about right now? Because you see, you selflessly give of yourself, but in doing so, you lose yourself. What happens? You find yourself by giving it away. Yes?
The Latin term, e pluribus unum.
Yeah, out of many, one. Yeah, out of many, one. That's the jazz. So true jazz then is, in effect, respecting both. You're not lost in the shuffle, in the collective. Everyone matters. Every person matters. And that's why the imagery of being a body and so forth is a collective whole, that each part, every person, especially when you train yourself to see people no longer according to the flesh. You start doing that, it's an awesome thing to do. You begin to think of them as God sees them, those whom he justified, these he also glorified. He sees them as they will be. He sees you as you will be. That's pretty strong stuff. That means you begin to realize you are right now in the midst of people, if you were to see them as they will become, would be tempted to bow down and worship. That'll be that the least of us will be greater than the greatest on the earth. And so this concept is astonishing. It means that every party matters. You see, no little people, no little places, and no little things. It's important. Now we have a few more minutes, so let's get some. I apologize for yapping so much, but I felt prompted to share this with you because, to me, it's an important idea of how even your wife, even your marriage should be jazz. You see, there's a jazz in marriage. There's a jazz in your everywhere. You begin to apply that at work. You begin to realize. I'll stop with that silliness. Well, it's not silly. It's actually a wonderful metaphor. So let's remember it again. It rewards individual expression. It does. You're not lost in the collective whole. but it demands selfless collaboration. You can't be doing it. You're playing by a different set of rules when you don't add the other half. So it's an interesting development then. Yes.
In your definition of jazz, you're speaking as the collective whole, as the orchestra? Is that what you mean?
I'm thinking there that the collective would be in that case the ensemble, however large or small, whether it's a whole band or whether it's just a quartet.
Okay, but it's not
the collective. It's not just one person. It's the collective.
That's what I was asking. It's not just one person. Okay.
Yeah, it's not one person. You can't do jazz by yourself. You can play jazz, but it's not the same thing until you have. It requires a reciprocal. Yes, it rewards individual expression, and that's very important. So it gives you dignity to your work, but demands, I like that word, selfless collaboration. I remember writing that down when I heard that, and I'm so glad I did, as I said before, because it serves me well. I'm beginning to see it as a metaphor for everything. The more jazz-like it becomes, the more it really enriches the unity and the diversity in a beautiful way.
Ken, one last thing, if I may. Lewis read a sonnet by Shakespeare that I think does so well in describing love that we talked about when we're to investigate. As the world defines love as lust, basically,
yes,
and temporal. Read that for us. So just take a second.
Which sonnet?
116. You probably know this by heart.
Yeah. Let me show it to you because I have it on my poems.
I'll read this. It's sonnet 116, and to me, think of some baseball player who's in the Hall of Fame's best at bat. This is the best thing Shakespeare ever wrote, and he's talking about true love, what true love means. He says, "Let not the marriage of true minds admit impediments. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds." So it never changes. That's the first stanza. Or bends with the remover to remove. So it's not dependent on the response of the other party. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempest and is never shaken. Doesn't matter how bad the storms of life get. It is the star to every wandering bark. It's the guide for your ship of life, whose worth unknown, although his height be taken. Love's not time's fool, though rosy lips and cheeks within the bending sickle's compass come. So as you see the beauty of somebody age and wither away, it doesn't change. Mm-hmm. Love alters not with his brief hours and weeks, but bears it out even to the edge of doom. And then he closes with his final couplet. If this be error and upon me proved, I have never written, nor no man ever loved. He said, if I'm wrong about this, everything I wrote is false, is untrue.
That's right. So I know we're going over here, but I want you to notice, I actually did a teaching. No, I haven't yet done this. I plan to teach this. 4 poems on covenant love. And one of them is Psalm 92. And then I'm going to teach this very sonnet here. And then third, because it's so exquisite, and the third one is Thomas More, Believe Me, If All Those Endearing Young Charms. And When You Are Old. And they're very powerful. And then I use the slingshot as a kind of a thing to bring them to that. So it's I ought to do that sometime. I've not taught it as such, but it would be a very good thing because all of it's about love, which endures.